I baked 4 dozen snickerdoodles every Sunday for 9 straight years and drove them 6 blocks to a house I was told belonged to my husband's cousin's kids. I never once asked why a grown man's cousin needed cookies delivered like clockwork. I never asked why the porch light was always on like someone was waiting for exactly me. And I never asked why the one time I finally really looked at the older boy's face while he reached for the tray, my hands went cold before my brain caught up. Because by then I already had the proof. I'd been writing it myself, one delivery ticket at a time for 9 years, and I didn't even know it until the day those eyes stopped me at the door. If you've ever found out the truth was sitting in your own paperwork the whole time, stay with me for this one. And if stories like this get you, hit subscribe because there's a lot more where this came from. My name isn't the point of this story. What matters is that I own a small bakery, the kind with flour on the doorknob and a bell that never stops ringing, and 9 years ago, my husband Callum asked me for a favor so small I never thought to question it. I built that bakery out of a rented mixer and a folding table at the farmer's market years before Callum and I ever married. By the time we said our vows, it had a storefront, a walk-in cooler, and a ledger. I kept myself down to the last stick of butter because that's how a small business survives. You track everything or you go under. Every order got a ticket, date, name, address, contents, cost. Not romantic, just how I ran things. Callum worked logistics for a regional shipping company, the kind of job with a lot of site visits that pulled him out of town 2 or 3 nights a month. I never minded. I had ovens running. 9 years in, on a slow Sunday afternoon, he leaned on my counter the way he did when he wanted something and told me his cousin Marisol, a woman I'd met maybe twice, once at a barbecue, once at a funeral, was going through a rough divorce. 2 kids, tight money, a hard season. He asked if I could put together a standing order. Nothing fancy, just cookies. A little sweetness for people who needed it. I said yes before he finished the sentence. That's who I was back then. I made the first batch that week and drove it over myself since the address was barely 10 minutes from the shop. The house was small and tidy in a single mom kind of way, a wagon on the porch, 2 bikes leaned against the railing. A woman answered, polite, a little tense, said thank you, and that was that. After the 3rd delivery, Callum told me he'd handle drop-off going forward since it was on his way to a job site. I didn't argue. Standing orders were nothing new to me. I had a dozen of them, birthdays and offices and a nursing home 2 towns over. This one just happened to be family. I did notice one thing early on and filed it away without much thought. Marisol never called to change the order. 9 years and it stayed exactly the same. 4 dozen snickerdoodles every Sunday. No substitutions, no cancellations. Not even the 2 Christmases I know for a fact she traveled according to Callum. I remember thinking it was strange for grief to be that consistent. I didn't think it was a lie. I thought it was a routine, the kind grief sometimes clings to, because it's the only steady thing left. I planted one more small habit that year purely out of professional discipline. I kept a mileage log for tax purposes, listing every delivery address by hand before I typed it into the system. I wrote Larkspur St. C's Place the very first week, then corrected it to Marisol's the next and never thought about the slip again. It sat in a binder in my office for 9 years, waiting for a version of me who knew what to look for. The years did what years do. My bakery grew from 1 location to 2. Callum's site visits grew too, from 2 nights a month to 5, then 2 entire weeks at a stretch. I told myself that's what logistics work looked like as companies expanded. I told myself a lot of things, and I was very good at it. What I didn't tell myself, because I genuinely hadn't noticed, was that the standing order for Marisol had quietly become the single most consistent line item in my business. Untouched, unquestioned, paid from a shared account that Callum managed while I ran the kitchen. He liked to say he was protecting my time by handling the household books. I let him. It felt like a kindness, not a warning. The first crack came 4 years in at his mother Denise's house for a rare Sunday dinner. Rare because Callum's delivery run now conveniently overlapped with family dinner more often than not. Denise, 3 glasses of wine deep, looked across the table and said out of nowhere, You're a better woman than I'd be doing all that for those kids." I asked what she meant. She went quiet, fast, mumbled something about Marisol's situation being complicated, and changed the subject so smoothly, I almost missed the flicker of panic before she managed it. The second crack came from Priya, who ran the flower shop 2 doors from my second location, and had become close enough to bring me coffee on slow mornings. One day, she asked out of nowhere if I still did that weekly delivery, the cookie one out on Larkspur. I told her yes, 9 years running. Her face did something strange. "Huh?" she said. I always figured that was just a regular customer thing. I let it go. By then, I'd built a whole architecture of reasons not to look. The third crack came from Callum's brother Theo in my own shop picking up a cake for his daughter's birthday. Somewhere in the small talk, he mentioned he hadn't seen Cal's cousin at a family gathering in years. "Feels like she just kind of disappeared after the divorce," he said. "Guess some people don't come back from that." I told him she was doing better, that we still helped out cookies every week. He gave me a look I couldn't place somewhere between pity and confusion and said, "That's nice of you," in a tone that didn't match the words at all. That night over dishes, I finally asked Callum casually why his own family seemed to know so little about his cousin's life. He didn't miss a beat. "Marisol cut off most of the family after the divorce," he said. "Too embarrassed about the money. I'm one of the only people she still lets in. Flat, factual, closed for discussion, the same tone he used to tell me the ovens needed servicing. I should have stopped there. I didn't. About 2 months later, I brought it up one more time, half joking, asking if Marisol's kids even remembered what I looked like after 9 years of me being the cookie lady through a middleman. Callum's jaw tightened in a way I'd learned to read as drop it. "You worry about your ovens," he said. "I'll worry about my family." It was the first time in 15 years he'd ever drawn that particular line, my family, not ours. And I remember standing there feeling something shift, even though I couldn't yet name what. A few weeks after that, his mother called me directly, which she almost never did. She didn't say much, just that she'd been thinking about me lately, and that I deserved better than a lot of things I probably didn't even know about. When I pushed gently, she backed off, immediately said she'd had too much coffee and not enough sleep, and hung up faster than the conversation warranted. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after that call, the same way I would months later sit with a text message that wasn't meant for me, because that's exactly what happened next. Marisol, the actual woman, not the story of her, texted my personal phone by mistake, clearly meaning to reach Callum. It read, "She can't keep doing this every Sunday forever. He's getting older. He's going to ask questions." I stared at that message for 11 minutes before I set the phone down. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what questions. I just knew with the specific sick clarity you get once or twice in a life that I'd read a sentence never meant for me, and that it had nothing to do with a rough divorce. If you were me in that moment, phone in hand, 9 years of Sundays, suddenly rearranging themselves in your head, would you have driven straight to that house, or waited to see what else surfaced first? Tell me in the comments, because what I actually did next is the part of this story I still can't quite believe myself. I didn't drive straight there. 9 years of running a business had taught me exactly one lesson above all others. You don't confront a problem before you understand its full shape. You gather, you document, you wait until the story can't be talked out of you, because Callum was very, very good at talking things out of me. So I went back to the one thing I actually knew how to do. I pulled every delivery ticket for the Larkspur Street address out of my own filing system, going back 9 years, dated, itemized, 468 of them. Everyone paid from an account Callum had at some point quietly renamed from Family Personal to just Household Miss, so it wouldn't stand out on a statement. I cross-referenced it against the mileage binder, and there it was in my own handwriting, 9 years old. Larkspur St. C's Place, written a full week before I'd ever heard the name Marisol. Before I said a single word to Callum, someone else showed up at my shop, a woman introduced to me that same week as Renata, a friend of Marisol's who'd apparently heard so much about my baking that she just had to stop in. She asked a lot of questions for a stranger. How business was going, whether Callum and I owned our house outright, whether the bakery was just mine or something we'd built together on paper. I answered on autopilot the way you do with a friendly customer, and it was only after she left that I realized she'd never once ordered anything. She'd photographed the shop's exterior on her way out, angled just enough to catch the sign with my name on it. 2 days later, I made the Larkspur delivery myself for the first time in almost 9 years. I told Callum I missed doing it, that it would be nice to see how the kids had grown. He hesitated exactly 1 second before smiling and saying that would be lovely. I drove those 6 blocks with my heart working harder than any box of cookies deserved. A boy answered the door, 12 or 13, with a cowlick I recognized because I'd watched Callum fight the same one in the mirror every morning for 15 years. He had Callum's exact eyes. Not similar, exact. The particular gray-green with the fleck of gold near the pupil I used to tease Callum about his mother's eyes. The eyes I'd looked into every single morning of my marriage. A younger girl came up behind him and called out, "Mom, the cookie lady's here." And the woman who answered the door 9 years ago, older now, tired-looking, came around the corner and went pale at the sight of me. Her name wasn't Marisol. I found that out standing in her living room. Her name was Renata, the very same name the friend from my shop had used 2 days earlier. Only this was clearly the real one, and the woman at my counter had been sent ahead to see what I already knew. "How long have you known?" Renata finally asked me. "About 10 minutes, I said. "How long have you?" "Since before he was born," she said, nodding toward the boy. 13 years. 2 years longer than the cookies. 2 years he'd hidden her before he ever needed an excuse to explain her existence to me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, not yet. I called Callum from that living room and told him in a voice so calm it frightened even me to come home that night because I had questions about a delivery route. He walked in at 8:40 p.m. and saw the delivery tickets fanned across the kitchen table, 468 of them beside the mileage binder, with his address written in my own handwriting a full week before Marisol ever existed to me. "I can explain the address," he started. "You don't have to," I said. "I've been to the house. I met Renata. I met your son." For one full breath, something in his face broke open. Genuine, unguarded, the face of a man watching 13 years of careful architecture collapse in real time. "I never knew how to stop it," he said. "Every year it got harder to end it, so I just didn't." For that one breath, I almost recognized the man I'd married. Then just as fast, the mask came back. "This doesn't have to destroy everything," he said. "The house, the bakery, our whole life, none of that has to change. We can figure this out." "You're right," I said. "None of that has to change. Because none of it was ever half yours to begin with." I set the deed to the bakery building down on the table next to the lease agreement I'd found folded into his glove box that afternoon. The lease for Renata's house, his name quietly listed as guarantor for 13 years. His lease. My deed. I let them sit there side by side and didn't say another word about it because the paper said everything I needed it to. He tried once more. "You'd really throw away 15 years over a mistake I made before we were even engaged?" "You didn't make a mistake before we were engaged," I said. "You made a choice every single Sunday for 9 of those 15 years while I stood in my own kitchen baking for a woman I didn't know was real." I told him what 9 years of running my own business had taught me, and what he'd apparently forgotten while hiding a second family inside it. The bakery had never been in both our names. I'd kept it under my sole ownership since I was 26 on an accountant's advice, and simply let him manage the household books because it felt easier than arguing over spreadsheets. Every dollar that funded Renata's house, her groceries, her kids' school photos had come from an account I could close with one phone call. I closed it the next morning. His mother, Denise, called me 2 days after that, not to defend him, but quietly, almost ashamed. "I told him years ago this would end badly," she said. "I just never told you." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close to enough. But it was the first fully honest sentence anyone in that family had said to me in 9 years. And I could hear underneath the guilt that some part of her had been carrying this as heavily as I now was. The final piece landed a week later from a person I'd never met, Callum's estranged Uncle Ferdinand, who called out of nowhere after hearing the news through the family grapevine. He told me something Callum's own mother apparently never had. That 15 years ago, before Callum and I even met, a small trust fund set aside for Callum by his late grandfather, meant specifically for the family, he would one day have had been quietly drained over several years into personal expenses no one in the family had ever gotten a straight answer about. Ferdinand hadn't thought much of it until now. Do the math, he said. 15 years for one plan, 13 for the other. Draw your own conclusion. I didn't need him to draw it for me. People keep asking if I regret those 9 years of Sunday deliveries, if I feel foolish for how long I didn't look closely at a face I handed a box to every single week. I don't. I've come to believe patience isn't the same as blindness. Sometimes staying quiet, staying steady, doing the one thing you actually know how to do well is exactly what lays the groundwork for a truth to eventually stand on its own 2 feet, with your own name already signed at the bottom of it. I won't tell you it ended clean. Callum's son still has his eyes, still lives 6 blocks from the house I used to call home, and some mornings I still think about that school photo on Renata's mantle that I'll never see age another year. I've made peace with the parts that never got resolved because I've stopped believing every ending needs to be. So tell me, if you found 9 years of your own handwriting proving a truth you never saw coming, would you have looked sooner? Or would patience have been your answer too? If this one hit you the way I think it did, share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe for the next one, because trust me, this isn't even the hardest story I know.